everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Crimson, and in this video we are going to be continuing our look through the Bloodborne official artworks. I know I have not been uploading for the last month or so. I just kind of took a little bit of time off over the holidays, and I hope everyone had happy Christmas or happy Hanukkah or any kind of happy holidays and had a good New Year. I didn't really, but you know, that's just me. So anyway, now that all that stuff is past, we are going to be back to the standard upload schedule, if you can call how I upload a schedule. So this is going to be part 3 of the Bloodborne art book showcase. And yeah, without further ado, let's just get right into it. One thing I want to say just before we start, or to try and just kind of speed things up a little bit, I'm going to try and not really go into too much lore dumps as I have in the last 2 videos. I'm just gonna try my best just to cover what's in the book. I will try my best. However, anytime I see anything associated with Bloodborne, it's like that meme of the monkey with the neuron activated, where I just can't help but talk and talk and talk and talk about it. So let's get started. Please excuse my eye drop bookmark because I have lost my bookmark. So where we left off last time was the start of the Nightmare Frontier section. We covered, what was the last thing we covered? Murgo's wet nurse and the boss fight and Murgo and all the implications about him. So, yeah, let's get started. So let me just fix the camera for a second. There we go. And again, I will be trying to do this with the left page so that the glare isn't covering it. And do please let me know in the comments if this does make a difference, because I really don't want you guys to, you know, have half the pages covered in glare. So let's get started. So we have some pictures of the frontier itself, along with some of the little glowing crystals that we find in the Nightmare Frontier with a hunter to scale. We also have some more artwork of some of the enemies. This enemy here is called a Winter Lantern. Anyone who has played Bloodborne is very familiar with this enemy. Very annoying to deal with, but in my opinion, this is actually my favorite enemy in the game. And fun fact, this enemy actually has the same clothing as the doll in the Hunter's Dream, although in a much more tattered state. So this is kind of what we can assume to be a, you know, severely altered, twisted form of the doll in the Nightmare Frontier. And this enemy here is called a crawler. I actually did not know that. And I actually can't even remember this enemy in the game, but maybe that's just because it's been a long time since I've played Bloodborne. A long time for me is 8 months. If I go 8 months without playing a game, I consider that like a a long time worthy of a new playthrough. Here is an excellent spread of the amygdala enemy. I know that the proper term for the actual part of the brain that controls fear, called the amygdala, is also referred to as the amygdala, but I think I heard somewhere that in Bloodborne they are called amygdalas, which is really cool because one, you only actually see these guys for the first time once you hit, I believe it's insight level 40, I think. I might be wrong about that. If I am wrong, please correct me in the comments. But the amygdala, or the amygdala in real life, is the part of the brain that controls fear. So looking at these guys, you can definitely see why this is a very suitable name. Also, earlier on in the game, especially in Cathedral Ward and leading up to the boss fight with Vicar Amelia, you see lots of statues with heads that are very similar to these amygdala heads. So I don't know if they're statues of amygdalas or if they're just statues with their head based on what the church members viewed them as. But this fight is very, very cool. It's a massive enemy. He's not super difficult, but he shoots the lasers out of his eyes, which is amazing. And it's just an amazing spectacle fight without being a gimmick fight. Here's some more pictures of the amygdala here. These are different variants. So we have this one with the smaller eyes, this one with the more massive bulging eyes. This one has a more tentacled head, very Cthulhu reminiscent. This one shows the enemy from the back with all of its hairs and arms and legs. It's just kind of like a mishmash of feet, hands, arms, elbows, and sinew. We also have some more pictures up here of their different hands. And this is a really cool picture. I actually can't remember seeing this before the last time I went through the book. But this is just a to-scale model of a hunter compared to the amygdala. And as you can see, the amygdala absolutely dwarfs the hunter. Okay, our next area is the Forsaken Canehurst Castle. And I know I have said this about essentially every area in the game except for the Forbidden Woods, but Canehurst is my favorite location in the game. The location is great, the lore is great, the enemies are great. It's just an incredible area all in all. This is kind of the vampire inspired part of Bloodborne. We had the werewolves and the Lycans and all those. So this is the more vampiric part of Bloodborne. And this is actually a secret area. It's not super secret, but it's an area that you can definitely miss on your first playthrough. You get the invitation to Canehurst Castle after sneaking into the back of Yosefka's clinic and finding an invitation which is strangely marked to you. And you also find a second letter with no intended recipient, which we can give to our buddy Alfred. who also makes his way to Canehurst Castle, but for very different reasons, as we will find out shortly. And if not, I will explain it. So this is another picture of Canehurst Castle here. We have some more pictures of the castle itself. This is the carriage that we use to enter Canehurst. It's very reminiscent of Dracula, in my opinion, or the first couple of chapters in Dracula. And when we arrive at Canehurst Castle, we find that the carriage is in absolute disarray and the horses have been long dead, which is very, very cool. So this enemy type, which is one of the types of enemies that we find in Canehurst, is called the Blood Licker. We find these enemies later on in the game, but the ones we find in Canehurst Castle are very gaunt to the point of being emaciated because they are starving. Now, the reason that a lot of the enemies in Canehurst are a lot different to the other types of enemies that we find in the game is, I think I mentioned this before in the Bergenworth section, but one of the scholars of Bergenworth snuck a sample of the blood back to Canehurst Castle, and it ended up still having the same effect on the inhabitants of Canehurst Castle, but it transformed them into massively different creatures than we find anywhere else. I think I mentioned this before in the Bergenworth section, but one of the scholars of Bergenworth snuck a sample of the blood back to Canehurst Castle, and it ended up still having the same effect on the inhabitants of Canehurst Castle, but it transformed them into massively different creatures than we find anywhere else. This is the main entry hall that we find when we first enter the castle. Again, very reminiscent of Dracula's castle, in my opinion. We have some of the items of the environment items, like the chandelier, the candelabra, and all of those. So here we have one of the Canehurst noblewomen, which were absolutely slaughtered during the executioner's attack. We find these enemies as specters rather than physical beings, since they are now haunting the castle. If you look closely at their enemy design, they have their throats slit where they were massacred by the executioners, which I just personally find very sad, and we have a bit of the heraldry here as well. So here are some of the portraits that we find as we explore the castle. I'm assuming these are all either previous rulers or nobility or nobles or relations, or maybe even just knights of Canehurst. But yeah, we have men, we have women. And this woman here actually has a child, which is interesting. This man looks like he's missing an eye, and actually looks kind of like Bloodraven from A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but if you are, you might find that he kind of looks like him. these are two of the attires of the knights and nobility. This is the male attire, and this is the female attire. Actually, this is actually the rooftops of the castle itself. And here is Martyr Ligarius, who is the leader of the executioners and who essentially led the charge in or the assault on the castle itself. What happened to the people of Canehurst is an utter atrocity, and is one of the main reasons I do not like the executioners. When I play Bloodborne, I actually really like the PvP in it, and I always choose to go with the Canehurst faction. We will talk more about Martyr Ligarius once we get to another character, and we'll explain more. This is the Canehurst armor set that we can find in the game, and this is the armor set that I always wear whenever I play Bloodborne, regardless of my build. I just think this armor is so cool. I know that the vast majority of armor in Bloodborne is very much just standard old Victorian clothes, because as we find in the Chalice dungeons, that when they first discovered what lay in them, the knights of the time were absolutely torn to pieces because they were too slow, which is why the hunters and everyone adopted more lighter gear, even though it has less defense. But this one is like the perfect mix of armor. As you can see, he has a full helmet, he has metal armor and everything with the half cloak. And just as a little aside, if you complete Eileen's quest, the enemy that ends up mortally wounding her, that you fight in Vicar Amelia's arena, actually has or is wearing the Canehurst set, so it's assumed that whoever that hunter was came from Canehurst. And as far as hunter battles go, he or they, I'm actually not sure what that enemy's name is a extremely dangerous foe and not to be taken lightly. He absolutely wiped the floor with me when I first did it. Also, I'm sorry if I keep saying he, if this character ends up to be a woman. It's just a force of habit. Whenever I talk about characters with helmets and stuff that have no voice lines from software, so if this character is a woman, I do apologize. So this is Queen Annalise here. She is the queen and matriarch of the Vile Blood Castle. Very, very interesting woman. We'll get more into some of what happens to her later. She is one of my favorite characters in the game. And here is a picture of her, what would you call it? Her main hall where she receives her knights and her nobles and everything. So this is her on her throne here. And there's a bit of a picture here of the throne. And there's also a quote from her here too. So she says, quote, "Very well, drink deep of our blood, feel the spreading corruption. Now thou too art vile blood. We too, the very last on this earth, we await your return for the honor of Canehurst." which I just think is a very cool thing to hear upon swearing allegiance to the Queen. The Queen's name is Annalise, by the way, and this is her here. This is the last Vile Blood Queen, Queen Annalise, and the executioners talk about her as being a monster and, you know, the absolute worst abomination to ever grace the earth. But she's not. She's just a woman with different beliefs than the church and the executioners, which I find to be very sad. I'll talk more about Annalise. I'm just waiting to see. Actually, no, this is a new area. So, what happens, I said that we would talk more about Annalise and Martyr Ligarius once we get to her. So, the executioners succeeded in essentially genociding the people of Canehurst Castle. However, Queen Annalise is immortal, so she wasn't able to be killed like the rest of the people of Canehurst Castle. So what Ligarius did was he sealed the entrance to her to her quarters and placed a chair in front of it and essentially sat down to wait for all eternity to fight and disparage anyone from coming in to seek audience with the Queen or rescue the Queen or anything. What he also did was, because she is a vampire, or Bloodborne's equivalent of a vampire, sorry, he put a metal helmet on her which cannot be removed to prevent her from biting people. Now, we obviously defeat Martyr Ligarius, and talk to Queen Annalise, and we have the option of joining her covenant, which we do. However, if you gave that second invitation to Alfred, he makes his way to Canehurst Castle too. And the Queen is immortal and undying. However, what Alfred does is he absolutely wreaks havoc on her body with his wheel weapon, turning her into essentially a pile of red paste. Basically saying that, you know, she won't die, she can't revive, and she's unable to do anything in this sorry state, which this poor woman, her people are annihilated. She's essentially imprisoned in her audience hall, and then Alfred does unspeakable things to her. I feel very bad for Queen Annalise, but maybe that's just because I'm a Canehurst supporter. If anyone is watching that's an executioner, you probably agree full on with Ligarius and Alfred, but I think it is absolutely despicable. So our next area is the Hunter's Dream. This is the Hunter's Dream as we find it in the end game after we have defeated Murgo and all that stuff. So we come back, and hopefully by this point you have consumed all 3 umbilical cords, and if you have, we will get to why later. So here we have Gurman, the first hunter, which I absolutely love Gurman's design in this. We also have a quote from Gurman, essentially saying that he's going to show us mercy by freeing us from the hunter's dream, which we obviously have the choice of accepting, which if we accept, Gurman kills us with his scythe, and that gets us one ending, or we can refuse and start a boss battle with Gurman, and upon defeating him, we get the second ending. Again, this is Gurman, the first hunter. So Gurman is very old and extremely skilled. Do not let his age and appearance fool you. He's missing a leg, but he is an incredibly powerful foe. Now, the third ending that we get if we consumed all 3 umbilical cords, and if we chose to reject Gurman's offer for mercy and defeat him in his boss fight, we find ourselves encountering the Moon Presence, who is essentially the Great One who made the hunter's dream and controls it. She is the one that has imprisoned Gurman. Now, there's 2 ways this boss fight can go, or this encounter can go, sorry. If you defeat Gurman without consuming 3 umbilical cords, the Moon Presence descends and grabs you and does something to you, and essentially makes you the new Gurman. You are forever trapped, wheelchair-bound in the hunter's dream, never to be able to escape. And if we have listened to some of Gurman's hidden dialogue, we find that he wants out more than anything. However, if you have consumed the 3 umbilical cords, then the Moon Presence's attempt to make us the new Gurman and host of the hunter's dream fails, and it initiates a boss fight, which I think it's a fairly easy boss fight, honestly, but the whole spectacle of it is incredible. The arena is great, the moon in the background is great, the design of the Moon Presence is great, and yeah, it's one of my favorite boss fights in the game. It's not my absolute favorite, but it is a really cool boss fight. Also, I just want to point out, these aren't stains. This is part of the Moon Presence's design. It's kind of like very ethereal, like, parts of it are floating off and stuff. This picture actually reminds me a lot of the blood-starved beast with its flayed skin. I know it's not flayed skin, obviously, but I just think it looks very similar. So, this is the Moon Presence here with a different look to it. This is a much more darker take on the enemy. So that marks the end of all of the book content referring to the main campaign of the game. So next up in the book is our first start into the Chalice dungeons. So here we just have some pictures of some of the starting areas for some of the Chalice dungeons. This is the main layout of the first type of dungeon. This is one of the hallways that connects each dungeon. The way the Chalice dungeons work is there's 3 mini dungeons followed by a boss, and once you complete each main or mini dungeon, you go through one of these corridors with some of these doors here that you can go into to get some extra loot. We have some pictures of some of the lanterns and stuff you can find, along with some of the cave systems in the dungeons. And here is some of the levers and pulleys and gates that you have to go through, because the way the Chalice dungeons work is each dungeon you have to make your way to a lever to unlock a locked door by pulling one of these levers, and then you backtrack to the beginning, go through this gate. It's usually this one here, and then fight the mini boss. This is one of the enemies called the Dungeon Watcher, which I just think is a really cool design. These enemies are called the Mole, which is a very... I'm actually not sure if these enemies are even hostile. They're actually very rare to come across in the Chalice dungeons. This is one of the hunting dogs that we come across, and this is a scorpion type enemy that looks to be a human that was transformed into a scorpion, I'm assuming due to consuming the beast blood. And I think this enemy, the scorpion and the mole, are exclusive to the dungeons. This dog, I'm not sure if he's exclusive. I know there's other dogs in Bloodborne, and if you've played Bloodborne, trust me, you are all too familiar with the dogs. But actually, upon looking at it, I believe this dog is exclusive to the dungeons. So here we have some more pictures of the insides of the Chalice dungeons. These are kind of the bowels of some of the areas, you know, they're just caves. Because all of these are Thumerian labyrinths, if you remember. And they are all beyond ancient. This is like, you know, in our day, if we found a bunch of Mesopotamian labyrinths. So they are all absolutely squalid in their conditions. So here are some of the enemies that we encounter in the Chalice dungeons. This is the Warden. He is often one of the mini-bosses that you fight at the end of each of the 3 dungeons. Sometimes there's just one of them, sometimes there's 3 of them. There's one dungeon that I know of by heart that has 3 of them, that gives some of the best blood gems for my weapon of choice, which is the Rakio. That's just because 1, I find it really cool looking. 2, it's Lady Maria's weapon, and Lady Maria is so cool. And 3, I am a weeaboo. Very dark pictures here, I'm sorry if you can't see this, but this is just more pictures of the interior of the dungeons. You know, we see the hunter with his lantern, just kind of showcasing how dark these areas are. This is a great picture here. This is one of the end rooms in the dungeons. And as you can see, you know, even though they're ancient, it's still very well decorated. You know, we have candles, we have statues, we have chandeliers. Same thing here. This looks like the upper floor to this area. Here is the dungeon Wolfman area. I believe this is a type of Wolfman exclusive to the dungeons. And here we have the dungeon Spirit enemy. Both really cool, but not the best enemies in the game, in my opinion. Their designs are really good, but in terms of fighting them, they're not that good. These guys are just essentially weaker versions of the beastmen that we find normally, and the spirits go down in like one maybe 2 hits. Some more pictures here of the dungeons and interiors. So this is the dungeon gravedigger with his pickaxe, and this is the dungeon warrior. He has an assortment of weapons. We have a crossbow, we have a morning star, we have a short sword, a great sword, and a shield. Some more interiors of the Chalice dungeons. This looks like one of the later areas with just the kind of dust in the air and everything. These are some more enemies. So I believe this area here is actually part of the Loran Chalice. I believe this is the 3rd level dungeons that we gain access to. This one is very, very ancient. That's why it's very dusty, very run down, you know, covered in dust and everything. It's not even just dust, it's almost like sand. It's like this was another kingdom that got buried because they succumb to the plague of the beasts. So this enemy here is called the Silver Beast. This enemy here is called the Loran Cleric. Let me just move that in. Again, he can be found within Loran. This is some of the flora that we find in the 4th level dungeon. I apologize, I actually can't remember the name of that dungeon. Some more pictures here. We have, you know, some of the doors, some of the altars, some more chandeliers with a walkway. I will say the door design in the Chalice dungeons is top-notch. And this enemy here is, oh no, this isn't an enemy, I apologize. This is the Runash armor set, which you can find. Very cool. Not my personal cup of tea, but it's very witch-like. Like I said, it's not my favorite. Most of the attire I actually really like. I'm just not a fan of the hat. But that's just my opinion. If you like this armor, let me know in the comments. Actually, you know what? Let me know in the comments, what's your favorite armor set in Bloodborne? And like I said, mine's the Canehurst set, but everyone has their own favorites. And what's great about Bloodborne is there isn't a bad looking set in the entire game. Say what you want about, you know, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring. There are objectively bad looking armor sets, especially in like games, you know, like Dark Souls 2. But Bloodborne, all of them are really good, and it's not a case of like, oh, I want to find one that looks good. It's they all look good, and it's, oh, I want to find one that suits me, which I think adds to that level of feeling like, you know, this is your hunter, this is you in this universe. So here are some of the bosses that we find in the Chalice dungeons. These are the end bosses for each of the 3 dungeons you complete. So like I said earlier, you start it, you complete 3 dungeons, each dungeon having a mini boss, and then at the end you fight that dungeon's main boss. So starting, we have the Old Lord Watchdog. Very cool boss, very cool design, absolute pain to fight, or at least in my opinion. I actually struggled with this boss more than I did with any of the main bosses in the game. Maybe that's just me. Let me know. Did you struggle with this guy, or am I just a scrub? This guy here is the Faded Giant. Very cool design. He has this massive sword. He has some kind of, I think that looks like a candelabra on his back, or at least a bunch of candles with chains coming out of him. So presumably he was once chained and has now broken free. This enemy here is the Bloodletting Beast, and is actually my favorite, second favorite fight in the Chalice dungeons. And here we have the Abhorrent Beast, which is another boss that we encounter here. So, and lastly, I believe this is the end of the Chalice dungeon section. This is one of the Fumarians, and he is one of the later bosses that we find in the dungeons, and he's very cool. Fairly straightforward boss fight, but it's just really cool seeing him. If you remember, I think I mentioned this before, or if you're familiar with Bloodborne lore, the Fumarians were initially the first race to encounter the Great Ones and all that. And they sacrificed their chosen women to bear the Great One's pregnancy, or the Great One's offspring, because the Great Ones need a surrogate to, be able to reproduce, because none of them, or no two Great Ones, are the same. What's cool about the Fumarians, not the Fumarians themselves, but just kind of their kingdom and their time, is at this point, the Great Ones had not ascended yet. So the Great Ones were physical beings on Earth, which I just think is really cool. And then after the Fumarians, some stuff happened which I won't go into because it's very, very deep lore and I want to keep this moving. But the Great Ones all transcended and cursed the Fumarians with the Plague of the Beasts. So this is where it started, and the Fumarians were patient zero for the Plague of the Beasts. And here is my favorite boss in the Chalice dungeons, not because she is difficult, but just because of the lore. This is Queen Yharnam. We see her spectre a couple of times throughout the games. We see her after defeating Rom, and we see her looking up at Murgo's boss arena. So what's interesting about her here is in the Chalice dungeons, it seems to be that this is actually her, and she herself is a Fumarian, and one of her abilities is to create clones of herself, or illusions of herself. And the way that you can find the real Queen Yharnam is the real one has the bloody stomach after Murgo was removed from her. So she's not that difficult. She's actually very, very easy to fight. However, just me personally, I think her boss is amazing lore-wise. So I think that wraps up the Chalice dungeons. I'm not sure. Yes. And here we start the Old Hunters section. So we of course enter the DLC through two steps. The first step is finding the eye of a blood-drunk hunter on the steps of the hunter's dream. Then, once you acquire that item, you go to the Cathedral Ward lamp, you take the first left, and you are grabbed by an amygdala and sent into the hunter's nightmare. Once this happens, a brief little cutscene plays. It's not really a cutscene, it's more of a cinematic with dialogue, and there was a quote of this dialogue here. It says, "Curse the fiends and their children too, and their children forevermore. I call to the bloodless wherever they be," which is just very ominous. And we will find out why this person has cursed the hunters and essentially created the hunter's nightmare. Not directly, but just as part of why the hunter's nightmare existed. The hunter's nightmare, we'll get into it more later, but it's essentially a kind of like a jumbled version of Cathedral Ward, almost like Cathedral Ward if it was in a dream. It's like some of the places don't match, some of the places lead directly into other places where they shouldn't, and hunters who are sent here are forced to live out the hunt for eternity, which is an awful, awful fate. We have, I forgot to mention that we have Lady Maria in her chair here, with her weapon across her lap, and the clock tower in the background. It looks like in this photo she has not, I don't know how or what word to use without getting, hammered by YouTube, but she is still alive. It looks like in this photo she has not decided to take her own life. And when we get to Lady Maria later on in the book, which I'm sure we absolutely will, we will discuss why she has decided to take her own life. So this is it here, our first entrance to the DLC, the Hunter's Nightmare. So yeah, our next section and location is the Hunter's Nightmare, the location in which the Old Hunters DLC takes place. And in my opinion, the Old Hunters is the best From Software DLC that they've ever put out. Shadow of the Erdtree is great. Crown of the Ivory King is great. The Ringed City is great. But personally, I just prefer this. Based on the enemies, based on the locations, the bosses, the weapons, everything. I adore this DLC. I have played through this DLC so many times, and I've started so many Bloodborne playthroughs purely just to replay the DLC. However, sorry, let me just zoom out. However, this is where we are going to end today's video. I know this video is going to be a little bit shorter, coming in just a little bit above 50 minutes, hopefully, once all the editing is done. However, I just want the part 4 to just be the Hunter's Nightmare on the Old Hunters expansion. There's actually not that much left of the book. Let me see if I can show you. This is the Old Hunters section here, and this is the rest of the book that we have already covered. So, yeah, this is where we are going to leave off for today. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, as much as I enjoyed making it, and I am super excited to start getting back into the rhythm of uploading regularly. So yeah, if you are listening to this video while laying down or relaxing or going to sleep, this is the end of the video, so I would click off now so that an ad does not pop up and wake you up. As always, your viewership means the absolute most to me, and I will continue to make more videos even after this. One question I do have, and I'll ask it again once we finish the Bloodborne art book, is there a book that you want me to cover next? I'm not saying which one. I was strongly considering doing another FromSoft art book that I have, my second favorite From Software game. If you have been watching this series, you may or may not know what that game is, but I'm very eager to cover that. However, if you would like me to cover a different art book, please let me know. I do have 2 videos showing my art book collections, if you want to watch those. And if one of the books strikes your fancy, please either leave a comment on this video or on part 4. I know I said I wanted to do or keep this as a 3-parter, but seeing as how we're almost done and how I just wanted to have the Old Hunters section be its own video, that's why we are doing part 4, but part 4 is going to be a much shorter video length compared to the rest. So I will say it one more time because I don't want to repeat myself too much, although I really do mean it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. My name has been Crimson, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good evening. Goodbye.